One question that comes up a lot, particularly when I meet people in person at my barbecue classes, is I'm having trouble keeping temp steady on my offset. How do you do it? How do you manage your fire? So in this video, I'm going to show you how I manage fires on my pits. Now I'm going to be showing you on my 300-gallon smoky oak pit, and I realize most of you probably don't have a pit this big, but I promise you these principles apply to any sized offset designed to cook with wood. And by that, I mean this pretty much excludes those typically cheap offsets that are designed to cook with charcoal. I'll even show you some footage of me cooking on the new smaller entry-level smoky oak pit, which is much more similar to a backyard sized pit. The fire management is exactly the same. So we're going to get into this pretty quick, but before we start, I cannot understate how important it is that you have the right wood. You probably already know that it should be hardwood and that it shouldn't be green or freshly cut, but one thing that I think is super important is that you should, where you can, use seasoned wood over kiln dried. I'll talk about your coal bed a lot throughout this video, and that's for good reason. It's the heart and soul of cooking good barbecue on an offset, and having a good coal bed is going to make fire management way easier. The problem I found with kiln dried wood is that it tends to turn to ash rather than breaking down into coals and staying as coals for a long period of time like seasoned wood does. I'll talk more about that later. I'm actually using seasoned oak wood from Smoky Oak Barbecue. There's a link below where you can order it and get it delivered to your home. And we're going to kick off by building a pretty standard log cabin style or Lincoln log setup fire. You can obviously use a chimney of charcoal like many people do, but my goal here is to create a huge coal bed, way bigger than a single chimney of charcoal, and I find doing it this way is just a little less hassle. You could use multiple chimneys. There isn't really a right way. All we're doing is making coals. And this is where we get into the first main principle of offset fire management. And the first thing I notice people doing that makes fire management way harder than it actually needs to be, and that is your coal bed. As I mentioned earlier, the coal bed is going to be the thing that drives this whole cook, not the actual flames from your fire, for a couple of reasons. So the first thing is having a strong coal bed is going to mean that your temperature is not going to swing by such a huge amount, and it's not going to swing as often. If you think about how many times you've put on a wood split and the temp dial flies all the way up until that split eventually burns out, and your temperatures are constantly going up and down, that's not the case with a coal bed. A real big hot coal bed will give you nice, consistent, even heat that doesn't change direction very quickly. So the goal here really is to build a coal bed that's big enough and hot enough to pretty much do 90% of the work as far as temperatures are concerned, and you're just putting on splits of wood to replenish that coal bed. The byproduct of that is you get some nice smoke, and that's what's going to colour and flavour the food. One of the benefits to this, and one of the things that I think separates good barbecue from the best barbecue, is that you're going to be cooking with a lot less radiant heat, and that's that kind of heat that comes from big flames, the kind of heat that's going to crisp up your bark, maybe going to burn your ribs up. Is the kind of direct heat that often overcooks the point end of a brisket, and it's also the kind of heat that the guys at Goldie's and M&M Barbecue are trying to avoid with their Goldie's pit. They're trying to separate the meat from the direct fire or the flames as much as they can, and we can do that here without having that style of pit. We just need to be creating a coal bed which is hot enough that is going to cook the food, get the temperatures right, and you're going to get that great smoke along with it. So keep those flames nice and low and your coal bed hot. So back to the actual fire that we've got running today. We've lit it. We're going to let these logs burn down to a nice coal bed. I'm not looking to put any meat on right now. I just want to break these down into coals. So the fire's ripping. I'm probably going to give this about an hour. That'll allow me to do a little bit of prep work. And as you can see, my 300-gallon is running pretty even already, and it will even out even more once that fire settles in. And about an hour after I set this fire, that's exactly what's happened. So this is the point about an hour later where I'm going to be ready to start putting on my meat. The flames aren't too hot, nothing's raging too much, and I'm just going to go in and break that stack of wood down a little bit just to kind of get it under control, get those flames nice and low, and start setting myself up for the rest of the cook. So I'll let that initial stack burn down to a point where I've generally got about 2 logs left, or 2 splits of wood left that are mostly unburnt. You can see those, one at the front and one at the back on the very top of the pile, and I'm going to arrange them across the firebox. So this layout is going to be really important later on, and it's going to be key to helping you maintain a nice low flame. It's not as important on this initial load, but I like to start as I mean to go on. So I'm pretty happy with my temperature. This is running about 225 Fahrenheit. So for now, I'm just going to close the door down, restrict some of that oxygen and airflow, which will help to keep the flames nice and low. This is also being twinned with having my stack about half closed at this point, and I'll just let that fire keep going. I'll check on it periodically. If that coal bed looks like it needs replenishing and that wood that's on top is starting to give a lot less heat out, then I'll look to replenish it, which we'll do in the next step. So 20 minutes or so later, I am going to be putting on my first load of wood replenishment. The reason I'm doing it at this point is because the wood splits that are on top didn't look like they had much left to give, and I noticed that the temperature did drop down a couple of degrees when I gave the thermometer a tap. So this is pretty much what we're going to be doing for the next 6-12 hours, however long you're planning on cooking for. And this, for me, I guess, is the most important bit. This is what you're going to be doing the majority of your cook. So as you can see, I've now turned those wood splits that were originally horizontal across the firebox perpendicular to their original position, like train tracks, and these two splits are going to act as the foundation for the replenishment wood. So we are going to take 2 fresh splits and we are going to set them down on top of the train tracks that we've just created. That's going to allow some airflow to run underneath through the middle. I'm sure you're all very familiar with that. But importantly, we are going to be putting them on so they're buttered up close together. So there's no air gap in between the 2 splits of wood. And the reason why we do this is to restrict the height of the flame. So if you have a gap in between your 2 splits of wood, you're allowing the flames to burn directly upwards. And we want to prevent that, so we close the wood closer together, and this is going to stop those flames coming up the middle and potentially becoming high, and we're pushing them out to the side exclusively. What will happen over time is those wood splits will start to burn, a gap will form in the middle, but by that point your wood should have broken down nicely and it shouldn't be raging, your flame shouldn't be too high. So we're going to set the wood on, we're going to make sure that they're nice and close together. It's going to push the flames out to the side, not upwards. And just like we did before, going to close our door down just to where it needs to be in order to reduce some of that oxygen. Make sure that we don't have an absolute rager of a fire going on, because we are putting on quite a bit of fresh wood. And I'm also just going to sense check that my damper's in the right position relative to how wide open my door is, to make sure that my temperatures are about right. Your pit's going to run differently. Your wood splits might be drier or wetter than mine. They might be a different size. So you're just going to have to adjust that and fine tune it until you get the temperature that you want from the size of the fire that you've built. And here you can see the evidence of exactly what I've been talking about. You can see there are no flames coming up through the middle of those 2 splits. And just to show you an example of what happens when you do open those up, I'm just going to go back in and create a little bit of an air gap, and you can see the flames coming up pretty quickly. So I'm going to close that back down, try and get that fire back under control. What I'm going to do now is time how long it takes between adding splits. The method that we're using is reducing that oxygen, so the fire's burning pretty slow, we're not burning too fast, we're not using kiln dried wood, so we're cooking nice and slowly. This is going to mean that we're not going to be replenishing wood so frequently, and I'm pretty sure that's something that everyone who runs an offset is keen to do. And our temps are still running nice and steady. So a quick check-in, around 31 minutes later, our fire is still going pretty strong. You can see those logs have burnt down a little bit, that gap's formed in the middle. Temperature wise, it's actually gone up a little bit as that coal bed is kind of replenished a little bit. It's gone up from the 225, just about 230 or whatever that is. Nice and even up top. We're just going to shut the door down and keep going. So a total of about 50 minutes after I put those logs on, I'm going to go in and I'm going to replenish them. They could probably last for another 10 minutes or so. I think I had to go a little bit premature because I was heading out on the day I shot this video, but just as before, I'm going to go in, I'm going to break those coals down below, I'm going to turn those splits that were previously horizontal in the firebox, turn them into those little train tracks, and just as before, I'm going to lay my new splits on top, make sure that there's no gap in between them, shut my door down, check my temperatures, and that's pretty much it. This process pretty much gets repeated over and over throughout the entirety of the cook, and it's the process that I feel gives me the best results in barbecue. It allows me some good amount of time between checking the offset, tending it, I can do other things. I would highly recommend, if you haven't given this method a go, give it a try, see if it helps you out. And obviously we were just running at 225 Fahrenheit pretty much the entirety of this video, but if you want to bump those temperatures up, I recommend increasing the size of your coal bed, spreading it out a little bit, maybe opening that damper, maybe pulling through a little bit more heat, maybe cranking that door open a little bit. Just be careful to not allow those flames to get too big. We don't want to crisp anything up. And just as I said at the beginning of this video, this method applies to even smaller backyard size pits, just like the Smoky Oak entry level pit which I cooked on at my last class at the SoCal barbecue shop. I use the exact same method and it works just as well. You just need to adjust the size of your wood splits. And whilst I'm showing this pit is actually for sale at the moment, so I'll put a link below as to where you can buy this exact one. So thanks very much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think of this method down below. It will really help me out, and I'll see you again for another video soon.